We're live. Good to see you, my friend.
You too.
How you doing?
Doing great. The main thing is like it's here. Like the time is now. We're all ready. We're all meeting, and yeah, it's time to build the shit. So
Indeed.
got the crew, like the hardware crew, software crew, everyone's here and ready. And so it's just about getting it all turned on. And once it's turned on, we can build on top of it. We can share it. We can create abundance for everyone involved with it, and it will become essentially the new commons. Once we have the commons, like the hardware commons set up, then we can get the software commons set up, then we can get everything else built on top of that, then we can get the federation built on top of that. So to me, it's a pretty cool foundation that if we can get that all going, we'll be unstoppable. Like there's going to be no way to slow us down, because we'll have the proper resilience, we'll have the proper hardware, we'll have the proper technology in place to just start to grow everything. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. So this is the stack right now that we need. And so we need we need the legal, we need the hardware, we need the cloud commons, we need the business layer, the mapping layer, and then the flow funding layer. With all of these, we will be ready to bring in hundreds of millions of dollars. But without all of this, we won't be ready. So this is what it requires, in my opinion. And all of this is built on top of the hardware commons. Because the hardware commons is built with Companion Intelligence and ZK, it will be the most secure, the most private stuff in the world, and so that it will be built on top of our own cloud. So that's the way that we build all of this the right way, right? Like, and it'll be built on top of our own cloud, but also built with Move, or also built with like crypto for the flow funding stuff. But we need this first before we can build out the apps on top of it.
So say we just have access right now to, let's say, 200,000.
Yeah.
To like what is the sequencing? And I think like the legal, in my mind, is yes, that's upfront.
Step
like
one.
That's what you're saying as well. Like if we, what's step two?
Step two is the commons, the hardware commons. So actually buying the machines and getting those machines in the hands of our devs. So actual hardware, because we need security and resilience from the get-go. And if we don't have the root, there's no reason to build this other stuff, because then we're going to have to rebuild it later. So we may as well build the first, so that we can actually have the proper soil, have the proper ecosystem health from the get-go, and know that we have that up and running. And the other thing is, because of how quick it is to vibe code and do all this other stuff, once we have the root, we can build GuildNet, mapping, and the flow funding all within a matter of weeks, probably. Because what we'll have the same shared backend infrastructure for all of our developers and everyone in the ecosystem. And you yourself could even vibe code a new app on top of it. Like, it's going to be set up so well that we're going to be able to all have the same shared backend infrastructure, and we'll be able to flow stuff into it. And then this also becomes an asset that we sell as well. So the way that we're approaching it with Atlas Research Group is that you can hire Atlas Research Group to come set up your hardware for your business, and then you can just flip a switch on the back end, and you can choose to keep it totally private, or you can choose to add it into the commons. So this becomes a mechanism that's very valuable across the board for everyone involved. Also, the timing of things, if we don't do this now, we can't take over the market in the same way. We need to capture the market, because what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months is everyone's going to move into hardware. And we have a little bit of an edge right now, that we are ahead of that curve. And we have the ZK hardware in addition to that. So our stack will be more secure than everyone else. And if we can position ourselves correctly, we can literally take over the entire market. So it's a strategic play as well.
That makes sense. What's the timeline?
I mean, as soon as we have money, essentially we just buy the machines, get them set up, and then we have like a meet in person for 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even a month. And we all just sit down in person for a month and we build. And by the end of that month, I think we'd have everything ready to go, probably including all of these apps on top of it. So within a period of a month of IRL somewhere in the world, probably we're looking at like maybe Vancouver Island or Washington State, but we could get everyone in person. We could build all this out. And within a period of a month, we could literally have the full stack.
But that means you also then need to raise the other 80 plus 300 plus 300.
Yeah, I mean, ideally we'd have the million. Yeah, I mean, I think we could do it all for 500K at a smaller scale, which is probably still doable, you know. And the thing that we have right now at Atlas Research Group is that through the Flourishing Foundation that's at the tower, that's our fiscal sponsor, and she said that basically any money that we get in, she can help match. So that's how we're approaching it. And it would be philanthropic. So there'd be no ties to investors, you know, needing returns. Not to say that we wouldn't maybe have some sort of agreement with investors off to the side, like, hey, once this is up and running, we're happy to like trickle you back some money and get you paid back over time and maybe even get you some profits on top of that. But we don't want to have that in the contracts. We want to make sure that it's set up in a way where we don't want to be bringing in those misaligned incentives. We want to make sure that we're building the proper ecosystem infrastructures that don't have that sort of negative Malachian thing on the top of it.
Okay, it's making sense. Can you please give me the most succinct pitch on what each of these elements are? So let's starting with the federated legal structure.
Yeah, so the federated legal structure would essentially be the legal structure that protects the hardware commons and the people within the hardware commons. And that includes the people who have the hardware as well as the people who are using it. And that includes these experiments. So essentially what it is we have the legal structure on top of the hardware structure. So, and the hardware itself is that we have Companion Intelligence, which has a partnership now with AMD, meaning we can get microchips from AMD. And then we have ZK, which has zero knowledge proof and post-quantum encryption, stuff that we can plug into the Companion Intelligence machines. That will make it the most secure hardware stack in the world, essentially, and the most sovereign agentic hardware stack. We're going to then build on top of that the Commons Cloud, which is essentially just a way to put data into this, right? So that will be like a data asset management system. So that'll just be a simple interface that will allow us to plug into the hardware commons. The second layer is GuildNet. That is the business layer. So this allows us to record calls, record group chats, all of this kind of stuff into membranes, and that those membranes are based on the groups that we're a part of. So, and that will have a memory that's an ongoing memory that can spin out tasks and resources in real time based on conversations that we're having and based on group needs, et cetera, et cetera. And then the mapping will be the high dimensional mapping that will allow us to map out the entire ecosystem, map out money flows, map out skills, map out resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the MycoFi is the flow funding experiment. So that's the flow funding interface that will allow us to flow money into all of these other projects and make sure that the hardware commons people are taken care of and that all of the people working on these baseline projects are taken care of. And that once these are all set up, we will then have a system that we can all share and we can all vibe code into using our own ontologies, our own skills, markdown files, our own JSON schemas and different things like this to allow us to essentially start to spin out infinite apps on top of this hardware backend. What this also allows us to do is to be able to offer the hardware as a service, essentially, where we can show up to any business and give them their own hardware stack, build them their own mesh nets, and offer them their own sovereign AI hardware stack for their business. But the cool thing is they will be able to make a choice of what information they then share with the commons. And the cool thing about this, too, is that we as a business will get paid to set up the network rather than having to pay to set up the network. I mean, obviously, the initial network we have to pay for, and that's the 120, but that gives us the back end to then be able to port people into. It's the most secure, most powerful approach. And then because we have all of that built...
Sorry, just wanted to get really clear about this. You just explain exactly when we say the hardware stack, what is it?
Yeah, so Companion Intelligence is a company that has a partnership now with AMD. They have essentially what is a $3,000 PC tower, and then they have all the way up to $100,000 server racks and everywhere in between. So that will allow us to deliver hardware at any scale to any customer. And then The ZK layer is that all of those hardware machines will have a ZK chip on them, and that ZK chip provides security, post-quantum encryption, and the zero knowledge proofs. And so that what that means is that we have essentially identity on chip. And so it's the most sovereign system that's in existence, and they're the ones that are stewarding it. Like, there's no one in the world that are doing what they're doing to the level that they're doing it, essentially. And if we have all of these things meshed in our own cloud, we will have essentially one of the most hyper secure clouds in the world, and that's just short term. Long term is Companion Intelligence is spinning up 2 data centers co-located in California. And so we'll have the ability to expand into that as we need to when the time comes. And then the ZK team also has a bunch of relationships all over the world with the most hardened and secure data centers as well. So we'll have sort of a multi-layer approach to being able to spin up more and more compute, more and more hardware as needed as we expand and grow.
So just to be really clear, this is privacy and security built in on the hardware level, which is something that doesn't exist right now.
Yes.
Until now.
Yeah, until now. And it means that everyone will have their own secure agentic identity. But the cool thing is, if you have one of these towers in your house, which our recommendation is that everyone gets one of these $3,000 towers, because then you will actually have a secure chip that has your identity attached to it with all of the data that you're aggregating. And that way you have it local, hosted for you, and it will come preloaded with our software, and it will be really easy for you to keep your data secure and then also be able to share your data with the data commons that we're going to have set up in a hyper secure way as well. And so that looks like homomorphic encryption, where we don't know who you are, but your data is presented to the network and you can still make money off of it. We can still do microtransactions. There's all sorts of other things that can come from that. So this becomes seriously one of the most powerful stacks. And I saw a talk recently with a lady. She said hardware is the final moat of AI. It's the last frontier, kind of. And so if we can do hardware, do it right, do it better than everyone else, more secure, it puts us at the leading edge of that and allows us to build a truly secure, truly sovereign agentic stack from the ground up.
Great, thank you. Tell me now about the commons, what we're talking about when you say you can flip a switch and share your data with the commons. Why would I want to do that? What is the commons? Give me a little bit of context for that, please.
Yeah, so the commons will be essentially what the internet currently is, right? So the internet is currently, a shared space that we all go to engage with information. But rather than it being totally open and able to be botted out and able to be infiltrated with, thousands of AI videos and fake shit, we're actually going to have a trust graph based commons that will be based on your network and the people that you share information with, as well as sort of public layer. And so you can think of the commons public layer as the new sort of shared internet space that will be based on human verified, identity and accounts and sovereign, hardware stacks, so that we can start to actually build value and flow value in a new way, where that looks like microtransactions for your data. So if you're sharing data with the commons, there's a good chance that you could start to make some sort of basic income off of that data by sharing it with the rest of the world as it's queried by the rest of the world, right? And because we have this sovereign stack that's totally secure, we know where the data comes from. We know, who it belongs to and who's contributing in what ways. And so we can start to flow value in those ways. So it becomes something that...
To be clear, when you say we know, what you mean is the system knows. There's actually no individual who knows. It's the system knows, right?
Yep. It's a fully distributed system. It's fully decentralized, actually decentralized, not like blockchain where it's fake decentralized. But an actually decentralized network, mesh nets on the local level, larger network stuff on the higher level. It also allows us, we're taking the approach with it where it can become the hub for a new sort of decentralized science movement, or just like essentially rebuilding the scientific paradigm from the ground up in a way that's not co-opted by, corporations, money, politics, etc. So it allows us to have a common space to be able to share information into and verify information is real and all these different types of things. And so it becomes really, really, really powerful. And it becomes the thing that powers the back end to a growing, shared, emergent ecosystem. For instance, I'm working on a bioregional manufacturing facility. I'm building out all of those relationships and those partnerships and the software that needs to run that facility. That software can exist in the commons so that someone else, somewhere else in the world, can access that information and set up their own version. And then they would then also share that to the commons. So it makes it so that we can start to share and iterate. The businesses that we're building will become more efficient as a result of this sort of shared infrastructure. Because now I don't have to pay for a lawyer. I don't have to pay to figure out the digital twinning of my facilities. I don't have to, because it already exists and the work's already been done, we can share it with each other. And that lowers that overhead costs of new businesses coming into the space and allows us to start to be able to scale infrastructure in this sort of fractal way with much lower overhead. So our money within the ecosystem will go exponentially further.
So let me ask you this question. If you're the one, say, who puts in the time, effort, money to develop that software that you'll then share with the commons, how do you get rewarded for that contribution to the commons?
Anytime your stuff is used by somebody else, there will be some sort of micropayments. And then also there's a level of me personally, I don't necessarily need to get paid back for it, right? Like I'm doing this for the commons. And so there are those of us who just want to provide information to this commons because we know that, the world is in a rough place. And unless we build this stuff right and actually show up correctly with the right intentions, and it's not about extraction anymore. It's about abundance. It's about how do we build a shared space that is truly abundant for us all to co-create within, share the information with everyone in an abundant way and not, it's not about that extraction anymore. It's about how can we uplift each other and how can the rising tide lift all boats and how can we make sure that the systems that we're developing, support that.
And this is where the threshold-based flow funding is interesting, right? That's sort of a bit of a solve for that, where we set a low threshold of what I absolutely need to just get by, and then a max threshold of what's enough. When am I good? You want to talk a little bit about that system?
It's about setting up, this is what I need on the minimal level. And this is what I would be really, really super happy with. And I don't need more than that. It sets us up for this idea of enough. And in an abundant world, there is a sense of enough where it's you don't need to buy 10 Lamborghinis. We just need to set up things so that we can thrive as an ecosystem. And then eventually, maybe that enough slowly goes up more and more and more as the ecosystem grows and we can all, again, collectively uplift each other. If we set that sense of enough, it gives people the ability to decide where the overflow goes, right? So let's say that I have a 3K minimum where it's that. If I have 3K, I can pay all my bills. Let's say I have a 10K maximum where if I have 10K, not only am I paying all my bills, but I'm living large. And once I hit that 10K maximum, I can choose where the money that's coming to me from the ecosystem moves. And so I can choose another person in the ecosystem. I could choose a project in the ecosystem, or I could choose an ecosystem that I really like that has many sub projects within it. So it really allows you to decide how you're flowing your money, from that sort of abundance into other people, into other projects, or even into your own projects. If you're I'd like to set aside this $5,000 for later, I can say, hey, I'm going to make this pool over here, and every little bit of money that I make on top of this will go towards that $5,000 pool that I built. And then once that $5,000 is there, then I turn on that flow funding mechanism. It flows that $5,000 to the people I've identified for that project, right? And so it allows you to build these buckets that you can flow money into, that then flows money ultimately to people, right? We want to be able to remove some of the misaligned business incentives of needing, websites and brands and investors to invest in things, where it's let's just as a group collectively build a thriving ecosystem and flow that money within the ecosystem in the ways that we choose to be able to make that ecosystem stronger, more resilient, more powerful. And again, it will collectively uplift everyone who's within that ecosystem in a really powerful way. well allowing everyone to maintain agency over where their money goes, how it's spent, and what their personal boundary conditions are.
Yeah, and when you were talking about like these big community pools, I'm imagining kind of like outcomes. Like I want to see this change in the world, and I can direct it towards a resource pool that might solve for a certain thing that's very important to me. And there's a lot of organizations that are going to that watering hole, being irrigated by that pool, that can help for the outcome that I want to see in the world.
Yep, exactly. And here's a sort of visual example of it, of like, okay, you have a pool at the top, you have like this main pool, a group of people, whoever's in control of this pool, like whoever created this pool gets to decide how the money flows into the sub pools, right? So if they're like, I identified 5 of my friends, and every pool requires a minimum of 3 people, right? So that you can have a sort of like voting, like two out of 3 vote, right? Allows for the decision to be made, like this is how the money gets spent. So every pool requires that. And once you have that,
At least 3 people.
At least 3 people, yeah, minimum of 3 people. Yep. And so once you have that, you can then create that sort of governance mechanism, and you can say, okay, we now have $250,000 coming in. 125,000 of that we've distributed to these other sub projects, and those other sub projects will have their own budgets, right? You're like, okay, 30% goes here, 40% goes here, whatever, it's distributed. And then whoever's a part of these groups gets to decide how it's distributed from there, right? And so if you're a sub member of one of these groups, you can get money from this project, and then you can choose to flow that money back up into this project or to flow it to one of your friends. And so here's a sort of self view of like, okay, here I am, I'm getting my personal minimum in, right? So I might be working on an experiment over here, that's a part of this network. I'm working on an experiment over here, that's a part of this network. And maybe those 2 networks agreed to create a pool of money that's also like a basic income pool. So I'm getting money from these 3 sources now, right? Because I'm working on a few different projects. And this also eliminates the need of like employees working for one company. It allows us to start to be able to work between different companies, between different organizations or networks, and allows us to start to be able to have a little bit more freedom in that regard as well. And then once the money comes into my minimum, that starts to get distributed. But then once I hit my maximum, and I could also get money from other friends within the network. So I'm not only getting money from the experiments, but I'm also getting money from other people potentially. But once I hit my maximum,
when you're saying friends, sorry, just to clarify, when you're saying friends, you might also mean colleagues or allies or people that are not just your buddies, but that are working in the same domain towards the same outcome.
Yeah, exactly. So there's other people within the ecosystem that have identified me, and they're like, oh, wow, Dylan's up to some really cool stuff. I'd love to throw him some money because it seems like he'll use that in a wise way as he overflows that into his other projects, right? So it can be anyone within the ecosystem that's a part of this can flow money to me. That can be from work or projects. And then when you hit your max, you can then choose, same thing. I want to flow this to a friend. I want to flow this to a network, or I want to flow this to an experiment within a network that I care about. So it becomes just a really powerful tool to create that sort of agency, to create that sense of enoughness, to make it so that our money as an ecosystem goes a lot further, and make it so that, we can start to support a lot more people at the baseline of at least getting people's rent covered, at least getting their base needs met. And then from there, start to build the abundance. And as we overflow into that abundance just gets distributed through the entire ecosystem. Yes.
Creating things that will make the world a better place. So actually just reaching that bare minimum is such a huge win for everybody, not just for the people that are getting their rent covered.
Yeah, for sure. It sets us all up to be able to thrive. And my hope is that we're able to do more than just the bare minimums, and that we're going to be able to actually get people into this, like up out of the scarcity mindset into a sense of abundance, and then into a sense of sharing that abundance with each other and uplifting those who don't have that abundance yet, and start to be able to really build a sort of new foundation for everyone, ultimately the technology that we're trying to build will support thriving of everyone in the long run.
Amazing. What is like a big picture, rough timeline for that happening, like where this might open up to the general public? Do you have any sense right now?
It's looking like I think it's going to take about 3 to 6 months to get all of the baseline set up for ourselves internally. It'll probably take another 8 months to a year to really do the work and work out all the kinks and the bugs. And then, maybe another year or so of upgrading things, evolving things, and then from there, I think we'd be ready to go public. So I'd say within the next 3 to 5 years, we could have a really powerful infrastructure for the general public to be able to come into. And, to me, that looks like essentially what would be a new peer-to-peer human verified internet and all of the infrastructure that comes with that. So that includes the hardware, the zero knowledge proofs, like all the different things. But that also includes a sort of new sort of cultural story around how we coexist in the world when it comes to businesses and different things like this. And the ultimate is that a lot of these businesses and everything within this ecosystem in the ideal sense would all be collectively co-owned. So as we're bringing in profits through our individual businesses, that profit is being pooled and shared by the larger communities in a holonic way or in a membranic way where we can start to, scale out. So you'd have like a very large pool of money for, let's say, the federation at large, but then that can scale into smaller and smaller pools of different subgroups that are, supporting themselves collectively. So not only does the flow funding sort of mechanisms help us do that at a smaller scale, but once we get that working, we could start flow funding money into community pools that support people. We could start looking at things like regenerative insurance. We could start looking at things like loans. So, what banks currently do, we could start to support a lot of that as well, of like, how do I build a house in my eco-village? Like, oh, well, here's a loan that you can get from the community pool. And that loan has much better rates because it's not an extractive loan. It's a loan that's trying to get you to thrive so that you can help the rest of the community thrive. And then ultimately looking at land too and bioregional manufacturing and things like that, once we have the land also collectively owned on a local level by like community land trusts and different things like that, that then own the bioregional manufacturing facilities that are then producing consumer goods and houses and robotics and hardware and all of the different things, we can start to have such a level of abundance that's collectively owned that it becomes almost ludicrous. Because now we're talking about, tens of trillions of dollars once this is functioning at scale.
Amazing. I want to just ask about this kind of 3-year time span before it goes public, so to speak, before it fully opens up. Tell me, like, what size, like, how many people are in that system? Who are they? What are the businesses? Is that what the federation is? Explain to me a bit more about that. Maybe we look at what GuildNet is, because we didn't get deeply into that, but sort of help me figure out what the steps are from where we are now to the point where this rolls out and starts changing the world in a large scale.
Yeah, so where we are now, right now, we're working on building the Atlas Research Group. The Atlas Research Group is sort of going to be one of the core groups, I think, that stewards this. That looks like a small team of, right now it's 6, but it will probably grow to about 30 to 50 people within the next month even. And then that will grow to another tier out, I would guess, to like 150 people or so. I don't want to go too much bigger than that for the Atlas research stuff, but that will sort of be the first membrane. From there, once we are able to get some of the tech set up and we're able to get everything up and running at a baseline, and that includes the legal for that stuff, we're going to then take another higher order step into a new legal structure that will then be more of the federation side. And so once we get into the federation scale, that'll be a sort of much bigger legal container that we have to solve for. And then we can start to bring in more and more businesses like Atlas Research Group. So we're treating Atlas Research Group as an ecosystem. And then the hope is that the federation can be an ecosystem of ecosystems, right? And so ultimately, that will become a larger ecosystem that supports many different ecosystems like Atlas Research Group to be able to build out different things, everything from the software to the land to the bioregional manufacturing, as previously mentioned.
So when you're saying an ecosystem, you mean that it's Atlas Research Group is a group of many experts with many different domains that are not just working on one thing. It's cross-disciplinary. You're sort of trying to solve the full civilization stack, and then the other organizations you'll bring into the Federation will be doing similar things.
Yes.
Or will they have domain focuses, or both?
Yeah, both. I think it would be both. Yeah, I think we would have domain focuses and we would have more of the multidisciplinary stuff happening. And the idea too with Atlas Research Group is, and with all of these businesses, is that these businesses should be able to be created and destroyed, right? And we need to be able to compost businesses. We need to be able to expand and contract. We need to be able to, not take these brands so seriously as like, this is my brand, this is the money. We need to flow this money into this brand forever and all time. In this sort of extractive sense, it's like, how do we create ecosystems that are here to solve a problem? And once those problems have been solved to a decent level of proficiency, that those things slowly start to dissolve to the point that, if they need someone running them, then maybe, yeah, there's a few people left maintaining certain things. But ultimately, how do we dissolve that? And then how do we move the people in those ecosystems into other ecosystems? And so the Federation allows us to do that, where we'll be able to move people between different layers, between different businesses. And because it's all federated and collectively co-owned, and it's all co-ops, and it's all self-owned in a way, and it has that agency in it, it's up to us to sort of do all of that in real time, right? And govern ourselves and expand and contract and really create a sort of new culture around what it looks like to create a business in this world, where it's not, again, about creating something that's just going to exist indefinitely into the future just because it needs to make money to pay its employees or, pay its shareholders so that they can buy yachts. We need to, move into a new way of being where we're in more of a flow state with the projects that we're working on, with the people that we're collaborating with, because ultimately it's about people, right? It's what it comes down to, is that we need to support the human beings who are allowing us to build these mechanisms of flourishing. A part of Atlas Research Group is also, really leaning heavily into the mapping so that we can identify different people, so that we can bring them into the fold on things when needed. So we can identify different technologies, different, theories, ideas. We want to bring in, economists and mathematicians and, anyone doing anything interesting that can help support us making this a more abundant, thriving ecosystem. We need to find them and bring them into collaboration with one another. And the flow funding is the mechanism that's going to allow us to do that in a really, interesting way. I don't want to say that I have all the answers and that this is like a rigid thing that, here's the structure and how it's going to work. This is a very emergent thing. This is something that we're discovering as we're building. We're trying to leave room for the expansion and contraction to happen in the ways that it needs to. And so that's sort of the narrative, is like that shift from, again, like my project, my name, my brand, into an ecosystem where we're all experimenting and collaborating. If we can just come together and build collectively in this new way and have the space to build without those misaligned incentives pulling at us at every layer, we're going to create far better products. It's just like we just will. And so it's the same sort of thing. Like in Silicon Valley, you have the like move fast and break things mindset, which I think is still important to some degree, but then we don't leave space for the move slow and fix things. And if we can start to leave space for the moving slow and fixing things, it's going to allow us to create products that outperform all of the move fast and break things guys. And because they're thinking in a very different way of like, I got to get to market, we got to get customers, all this stuff. But if we don't have to do that, we can build tools that actually work for people. We can build real solutions that aren't extractive and that create that sense of abundance for everyone. And then the other layer of what we're exploring with the Atlas Research Group is moving away from interoperability into interactability. It's about the interactions that we have with each other. It's about how we decision make together. It's about all of that kind of stuff. Interoperability is sort of a back-end term, right? So it's about the back-end infrastructure and how it works with itself. Interactability is not only about how we interact with each other, but it's about how we interact with technology. So it's about the front end. It's about how do things actually work for us, And what does that actually look like? What does that relationship with the technology look like? And what does that relationship with each other look like? And how can we make decisions around those things that actually allow us to thrive, rather than saying, oh, I want to do my thing, you want to do your thing, let's make sure that they work together. It's like, hey, let's just come together and compost them from the beginning, and then they will work together automatically. We don't have to worry about interoperability at that point. We just have to make decisions and experiment collectively. And so, yeah, that's something that I think is really a big shift.
I want to, for my own benefit and also for our lovely viewing audience out there, I want to just get a little bit more on GuildNet, because you guys have talked about it a fair amount, and I'm still not, I think I'm getting it, but can you give me a little bit more detail on that, please?
The GuildNet is the business layer. So the GuildNet is the layer that allows us to get shit done. It's the collaboration layer. And so what this layer does is it allows us to be able to create membranes, the same membranes that would exist in the flow funding experiment. So for instance, let's say Atlas Research Group is one membrane, right? So Atlas Research Group is its own group. We are able to take our Signal chats, our WhatsApp, our Telegram, our Discord, wherever we choose to exist, we can bring GuildNet into those spaces, and we can allow that GuildNet to see our conversations, to see our chats, to record our real-time video chats and all that kind of stuff, to then spin up tasks and quests. The hardware commons is one quest. The common, this is a quest, this is a quest, this is a quest. Each of these quests will have tasks that needs to be done. Now, all of this is within the Atlas Research Group. So we have that larger membrane that is collecting all the data on how all of these things work together. And then we have the individual membranes of the actual individual projects and the specific people working on those. And then there's a way that those membranes kind of work with each other. Let me see if I can pull this up too real quick. So the way that you can kind of think about it is that each individual will have their own sort of membrane, and each group will have its own membrane. Now, each individual, they have their own tasks that they're tracking. They have their own money. They have their own settings. They have their own value and data, and they have the chats that they're a part of. That all gets brought into the group dynamic, where you have the collective information of each individual that are contributing to that group. And then the group itself has its own thing. So it has its own like timeline memory. It has its own sort of base truth of like, this is Atlas Research Group, and this is what we stand for, and our principles and our ideals and that kind of stuff. And then it also has its own sort of informational doc infrastructure of like, these are all the documents that we need. And then you have the call database, which is like all of the transcripts that come from calls that are from these different individuals coming together to be able to participate. So what GuildNet is essentially the business infrastructure that allows us to be able to sense make in real time through these different membranes. And then you would also have the commons as a higher order membrane, where maybe some of the stuff that's happening in the Atlas Research Group gets sent into the larger commons, or maybe not. You know, you get to choose how you control your membranes and what information is used where, when, why, and how, right? So that's essentially what GuildNet is.
It's like an organizational tool set where like all the organizational data, like coming from an individual, is going into a sort of central repository. And then there's probably some kind of agentic AI that's then going between the different nodes and maybe into the commons and saying, you know, these need to be networked together. There's tasks over here that relate to tasks over here. This person could fulfill that task. These resources should flow here, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it allows us to better collaborate at scale, and it will always have that collective database that is continually growing and expanding over time.
We could go deeper, and I want to. And also, I feel like this is a good amount for today. And let's do it again, because it's blowing my mind. I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot, and it's it's a complex thing, and it's a simple thing too. Like, it's like, how simple can we make something complex? And this is a big aspect of what we're trying to do at Atlas Research Group too, is like within the mapping is like this sort of movement between the expansion into the complexity, then the sense making that happens in that complexity, to be able to simplify that complexity, to be able to understand it intuitively, and then to be able to go back and forth between that continuously, right? So how do we expand, sense make, simplify, expand, sense, make, simplify, and do that in this iterative way to be able to build really powerful things in a scale that wasn't possible previously, due to the new technologies and AIs and all the different things coming out now.
So wait, to take us home, I have one challenge for you, if you choose to accept. In as few words or sentences as possible, please describe to me what the world looks like in 20 years, 25, 30, 50. You choose the time horizon when all of this is mature and it's all working. What is life like?
I would hope, I would hope that life is incredibly beautiful. So a little bit about sort of like my personal, I guess, mission in a way is like, I feel like it's my mission to bring beauty back into the world in a way that that we've been separated from. So that is to say that a lot of the beauty in the world has been commodified and made into luxury. And we separate ourselves from it. So that's like beautiful architecture, beautiful spaces, beautiful fashion, beautiful products, right? This is all, it gets made expensive and it's out of reach for most people, and they see it and they dream for it, right? They yearn to have that beauty in their life. Because of that separation, and because of another core separation, which is the separation between man and nature, and man thinking that they're separate from nature and not realizing that they're actually a part of nature and an extension as stewards of the natural world, and that the natural world is actually a very beautiful place innately, right? And so therefore, we as an extension of the natural world, we deserve beauty, and we shouldn't have separated ourselves from that awareness and from that beauty through the commodification of goods and through the creation of luxury markets. And so my goal is to build a world where that beauty and that luxury is the baseline for everyone. And so to me, that looks like, eco villages and communities that are self-supportive, circular economics, self-contained. They have their own manufacturing facilities. They have their own, farms, and they have their own data centers with their own AI that is learning from those communities. It becomes a place where it's filled with abundance, right? When we live in a sort of post-scarcity world, to me, the downtown will be a immersive food forest with winding paths. Your city becomes a mechanism of discovery and growth that challenges you to slow down and experience it at every layer and experience the beauty that's there for you, right? And so if we can build more beautiful cities that are fully immersive in that way, and allow people to slow down into the present moment and experience that beauty continually, and have a deeper sense of community, and have the technology supporting that abundance. So it's like the technology, it's not about joining the Neuralink hive mind. It's about using technology to free ourselves up in the ways that we can slow down and be in right relation with each other and with the natural world. And so that's sort of the future that I see. I see that being possible, right? And when you look at, like, if we have a bioregional manufacturing facility that's able to build our house, that's able to provide our toothbrushes and our furniture and all of these things, and it's all built with materials that are native to that region, and those materials are not overly harvested or extracted, they're harvested at the proper rates, or we're using materials like mycelium or bacteria that can grow from nothing and that we can grow and create this sense of abundance. I think we're going to get to a space where we have so much abundance that we don't really know what to do with it. And then at that point, it just becomes like, wow, like we can just enjoy life and relax and meditate and be in relation and learn about the things that we love. We could have guilds set up where you're learning from masters, you're learning how to, do wood carving or pottery or whatever it is. And we'll have the space to really slow down and do those things in a way that allows us to connect to ourselves, to the natural world, and to the sort of divine nature of things, and reconnect with that beauty. So yeah, I see a very beautiful world. I guess, yeah, Eisenstein has the sort of the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. I see that very clearly, and I think that we're close. maybe a decade or two out from some of these examples being made real and the experiences being made real. And once we can start to point to them, it may sound very like woo woo or, not possible based on the sort of trauma mindset that we're in and based on the sort of chaos of the warmongers dying empires. It may seem like it's really far out, but I think that we're a lot closer than we realize. And once we start to see these examples made real, we'll know. We'll be like, that's what we need. That's what we want. That's what we've been craving for so long. As the world is crumbling around us, we have to be prepared to build this stuff up to support those people that are going to fall out of that crumbling empire. So yeah, so that's sort of my vision, is that we have the ability to slow down, experience the beauty of nature and the relationships with each other and the spaces around us. Yeah.
Okay, last question, I promise. As I know that we're both movie lovers, so in this beautiful future, what's the equivalent of going to the movies like? What is entertainment beyond being outside and connecting and meditation? Say we would just want to go have some fun at the movies. What's it like?
That's an interesting question. In my mind, so by the time we're able to build our own houses and do all of this stuff, I'm assuming there's going to be a fair amount of technological advances around things like augmented reality. But I'm even more interested in like holograms or holographic displays. The way I was looking at it is like you essentially have nano LEDs. The LEDs are lit up by the electromagnetic frequency of the current that's actually floating them as well. So you use sound, vibration to float tiny microscopic nano LEDs that are able to change color and stuff. So it creates this essentially swarm visualizations within three-dimensional space where you don't need to wear augmented reality glasses or anything like this. You can be in these immersive worlds that are sort of even co-created with you, right? I think but I think movies will be more like dreams that are kind of co-created with us and with each other even. Like maybe you and I could sit down together and just have a conversation, and that through that conversation in real time, the movie emerges around us in this fully immersive environment. And we're seeing that with like AI, with like seed dance and like all this stuff right now, where it's like we're allowing ourselves the ability to sort of dream in real time or create storytelling in real time in a way that wasn't previously possible. I think that's going to be taken to another extreme around three-dimensional space. So it'd be these sort of fully immersive worlds that we can go into. That said, I feel like there's going to be less of a desire to escape reality, right? So currently we kind of hide into movies, like we go escape into movies because our lives are mundane and we need to do that to sort of balance ourselves. I think that's going to be less necessary. So I think that the real world is going to become so magical that it's going to be like you're living in a movie constantly. So there's going to be less of a desire to escape into a fiction. Not to say that there still won't, because I do still see there will be artists who want to create stories for other people and invite them into them. But I see it as being much more of an immersive thing that becomes a lot less necessary as a form of escape, and maybe is more necessary as a form of getting to know someone or something. Like, let's say you meet someone for the first time, maybe they show you their movie of their life or something, right? And so it becomes something that's more of a relational thing rather than an escapism thing. Mm. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, man. That was awesome.
For sure.
Took me on. That was a movie. I feel like I just watched a movie. We went on a ride together. Let's do it again.
Yeah, sounds good.